Yesterday during my live stream, I actually wanted to test out rate of fire. Usually in a lot of games, game statistics are not quite accurate. The reason why they are not quite accurate is because in most of the cases those rounds per minute are calculated by machine. They're not calculated by a real dev. Which means if they wanna 800 rounds per minute on the weapon, they're gonna place 800 rounds per minute in the script, and that's how many bullets weapon is gonna shoot if it has unlimited amount of the ammunition in 1 minute. I do not want to start from the scratch with the testing because I have done nice amount of the stuff on the live stream, so I'm gonna give you edited version of my live stream from the yesterday, and then after that's done, we're gonna come back here in the Skra headquarters. What does it say in the game? How much rate of fire it has? It's 650. 620 rounds per minute. So the game is lying. Statistics are lying. It has 30 less rounds per minute. Let me check M4. What does it say? No, 800. It's 2.6. What? Let me try with spikes on the sound. That's 100 rounds per minute less. 100 rounds per minute less. Do you know how many bullets that is? That's 11 bullets less per second. It depends on my FPS when you're firing. It's factory, man. You really do think that FPS is gonna change if I increase it? If FPS is important with the rate of fire, that means high FPS is gonna give you great advantage. Interesting, bug fire rate is linked to the frame rate. Are you kidding me, dude? Okay, let's try it out. Let's try it out. If I have that amount of 120 FPS, guess what is gonna happen on 25 FPS? I know that in Call of Duty 2, engine was working like that. The more FPS you had, the better performance of the weapon was. And pros were playing Call of Duty 2 in like minimal resolution, like 640 times 400 something. So that's 30 FPS. Oh, under 30. Okay, great. What? How much is that, dude? 545. That's 150 rounds per minute less. I'm not playing Shoreline anymore, that's for sure. What about AK? Since we are here, let me check the AK. What happened? We are testing rate of fire. And low FPS is destroying fully automatic rate of fire. And this is offline. Yes, this is offline. I actually have 2 accounts. I cannot test this on stream. I have 2 PCs. I can test this off stream. I can record both perspectives. 450 rate of fire. 450 rate of fire. That's minus 150 rounds per minute. Same thing like M4, 150 rounds per minute less. Why do developers hate me, man? Why? What's the big problem here? The problem is that FPS depends on the rate of fire of the weapon. In the game, AKS stands for 650 rounds per minute, And when you're playing on 30 FPS, rate of fire is actually 450. That's the problem. Do you understand? That game needs to work. If I see somebody that opened the doors, he needs to open those doors at the exact same time on my screen. Do you understand that if I see this rate of fire, and if my aiming is following this rate of fire, needs to be exactly the same on the server side? Because if I'm following this rate of fire and this movement speed, and server is picking up this movement speed and this rate of fire, my accuracy does not work on the same level. Do you understand that? Do I need to open the paint and the Photoshop to draw it for you? Okay. When that's done, let me see one more thing. Let me change resolution real quick. Let me go in the factory again with insanely overpowered rate of fire. Let me test it again. Can I record it in 120 frames per second? I think this should work. It is 120 FPS. Okay, so this footage is 120 FPS and the 120 FPS is locked. And yes, that's why people are actually good that are using 120 Hz monitors. That's why everyone is so uber good, man. Because of the high frames. Yes, this is common knowledge, dude. Now even sound is late. Even sound is late, dude. On the first testing I also had the 120 FPS. So what it says on the top right, that's it. You should follow that. It doesn't matter what's your resolution. So if you're running customs and you have terrible FPS, lower down resolution, lower down everything just to have that 120 FPS. Now the reason why there is a second part of the testing, because 99% of us are probably playing multiplayer. Although in the single player performance should be impressive, but they are not. Like I already said, I have 2 accounts and 2 PCs. So I logged in and went inside of the match in a group and I was recording both sides. On the first testing I went inside of the customs and I have dropped FPS of the shooter on 40 FPS. And by the way, every single testing that we are gonna do is gonna be with the M4, aka with them 800 rounds per minute weapon. Well, it is actually 700 because they nerfed it, but they forgot probably to change it in the description. But we're gonna go with the M4 just because of the high rate of fire performance. And in the first testing, time to empty was 3.9, which means 461 rounds per minute. So viewer had the 70 FPS and the shooter had 40. Exact same shot, I was not doing it twice. Oh, look at that! Same rounds per minute like before. And pay closer attention on the end of the magazine. Remember those hiccups here. On the viewer's screen he stopped with the fire, but on the shooter's view he never stopped with the firing. I wanted to test it out one more time in case if the hiccup will not happen and maybe it is gonna perform on a different rounds per minute. So here is the test number 2, same FPS like on the test 1. On the test number 2, from the shooter's perspective, he had 450 rounds per minute on the M4. Now let's see what the viewers see. Now the hiccup is not on the end of the magazine now, hiccup is in the middle, it still happened. And in the test number 2, while the viewer had 60 FPS and the watcher and the shooter 40, we can say that your rounds per minute, if you're playing in 40 FPS, is gonna be 450. Not 800, not 700, 450. On the M4. Now, what happens if I'm gonna switch the positions? if I'm gonna give the weapon to the guy with a 60 FPS and if there is gonna be a viewer with 30 FPS. So now in the test number 3, the shooter has 60 FPS, emptied the magazine in 3 seconds, he has fired 600 rounds per minute with the M4. Let's see what viewers see with a crappy FPS. So the guy that is even not firing because of the terrible game update, he have seen the hiccups. Although rounds per minute are staying the same, despite the fact that this hiccup happened. In test number 4, I was testing out with 20 FPS on the shooter. He had 360 rounds per minute. Just to seal the deal, I went on the extreme. I have increased the graphics on the maximum to have terrible performance on the second PC. So here is the shooter's perspective. Now let's see this test number 5 from the viewer's perspective in 40 FPS, watching the shooter with 1 FPS. I think I don't even need to explain you what just happened, right? Test number 5, the shooter has 115 rounds per minute, and here are my final words. FPS affects rounds per minute. When you're in the match with 120 frames per second, if you lock your FPS on 60, for example in the factory, you're gonna have lower rounds per minute than the guy that is shooting with 20 FPS limit. Although this is not the worst case scenario, because the game update, aka those spike lags that are happening here or there, are also having a great influence on the weapon's performance. So every single time when you get that spike lag, you're not shooting. So next time when you're watching your favorite YouTuber, check how much FPS he has, because that's probably the reason why he's so good in this game and you suck. And because of this testing, you can expect more testings in future. And before we wrap this up, I wanna recommend you something. So if the average frames per second on the customs for all the players are for example 60, that's when it is okay to play this map in the 60 FPS. Just because everyone on the map is affected by low rounds per minute, not just you. Which means you will not see me running around the medical resort with the equipment anymore. Thank you guys for watching and see you in the next one. Eroktic out.